It's wild how long rumors about Pacific Rim 3 have been floating around, especially the ones claiming it was supposed to tie into the Godzilla vs. Kong universe. It's one of those ideas that instantly gets fans hyped, because both franchises revolve around massive monsters and earth-shaking battles. So, the thought of Jaggers squaring off against Godzilla or King Kong is the kind of crossover that feels like pure cinematic chaos in the best way. But how real are those rumors? Let's dive into how much truth there actually is behind them, and why Pacific Rim 3 probably won't happen anytime soon. When Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim hit theaters back in 2013, it didn't exactly blow up the US box office. It made a modest $100 million domestically, which wasn't great for such a massive blockbuster, but things turned around overseas. The movie became a global hit, pulling in around $400 million worldwide, which proved that audiences across the globe were all in for watching giant robots punch massive monsters through skyscrapers. That international success became the foundation of what would slowly turn into a surprisingly big franchise, with movies, a Netflix anime, Pacific Rim: The Black, graphic novels, and even some video games that fleshed out the lore. Still, the main attraction has always been the feature films. Fans have been waiting years to see if Pacific Rim 3 would ever happen, especially after Pacific Rim Uprising in 2018 left some story threads hanging. Unfortunately, as much as people want to believe in the next chapter, that's really all it is: rumors and wishful thinking. The biggest sign that Pacific Rim 3 isn't happening is the total silence from anyone actually involved in production. Legendary Pictures, the studio behind both Pacific Rim and the MonsterVerse films, hasn't said a word about a sequel, and considering how busy they are with their ongoing monster lineup, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, and whatever's coming next, it's pretty clear they're putting all their energy into that side of things. Those movies already scratched the same itch: massive creatures brawling with spectacular destruction, so from a business standpoint, they don't really need Pacific Rim right now. Even Guillermo del Toro himself has stepped away. He made it very clear that while he still loves the Pacific Rim world and even fantasizes about seeing his Jaggers battle the Titans from the MonsterVerse, he's not the one to make it happen. In a post on X, he said he'd love to see the crossover as a fan, but followed that with a definitive statement: no plans to return. So, as much as fans would love to imagine Del Toro helming one last round of Jagger vs. Kaiju mayhem, it's not in the cards. On the acting side, things aren't much brighter. Charlie Hunnam, who played the lead character Raleigh Beckett in the first movie, has expressed interest in returning, but only under one condition. In an interview with Inverse, he said he'd be on board for Pacific Rim 3 if Guillermo invites me. Basically, he'd show up for Del Toro, not necessarily for the franchise itself. That says a lot about where his priorities lie. Hunnam clearly respects Del Toro, having worked with him on both Pacific Rim and Crimson Peak, but it doesn't sound like he's been holding his breath for a sequel. If it happened, he'd join more out of loyalty and admiration than passion for the story. That bond between the two is something fans really appreciate, and in a way, it adds a layer of nostalgia to the whole situation. The idea of them reuniting for one final Pacific Rim project is exciting, but again, it seems more like a fun dream than a real possibility. Part of the reason so many people still think Pacific Rim 3 is on the way is because of the countless... Even though we may not be getting Pacific Rim 3 on the big screen, the universe is far from dead. Legendary Comics, which is tied to Legendary Pictures, has been keeping the story alive through graphic novels. There are already 5 books: Tales from Year Zero, Tales from the Drift, Blackout, Aftermath, and Amara, each exploring different corners of the Pacific Rim timeline. These stories dive into events that happened before, during, and after the films, giving fans a richer look at the world of Jaggers and Kaiju. And there's even more coming. In 2024, Legendary Comics launched a Kickstarter campaign for a new 3-part graphic novel series called Pacific Rim: Final Breach. It's set after the events of the movies and focuses on Jake Pentecost and Herman Gottlieb as they come up with one last desperate plan to seal the interdimensional rift and stop the Kaiju once and for all. The story also brings back Raleigh Beckett, who vanished after the first film, making it a kind of spiritual conclusion for the main characters. The Kickstarter was a huge success, raising over $200,000 from more than 1,500 backers, all eager to see the saga continue, even if it's on paper instead of film. Final Breach will be written by Joshua Fialkov, known for Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action series, with art by E.J. Su, who worked on Transformers. The first volume is set to release in October 2025, followed by the next 2 parts in 2026 and 2027. It's not Pacific Rim 3 exactly, but it's the closest fans are going to get to seeing how the story wraps up, and it sounds like a fitting conclusion. Now, about that much-discussed crossover with the MonsterVerse. According to Pacific Rim Uprising director Steven S. DeKnight, the idea wasn't just fan speculation, it was actually something he wanted to make happen. He revealed that his plan for Pacific Rim 3 included a storyline that would eventually connect to the Godzilla vs. Kong universe. Imagine that! Jaggers standing shoulder to shoulder, or maybe toe to toe, with Godzilla and Kong, facing some massive threat that forces humans and Titans to unite. It's a crossover that feels like a natural fit, considering both properties are under Legendary's umbrella and share a fascination with colossal-scale destruction. DeKnight even talked about this idea a few years ago, saying that while he couldn't confirm it would have definitely happened, it was something he pitched and wanted to explore. Ultimately, though, the decision wasn't up to him. It rested with Legendary. Sadly, given how Pacific Rim Uprising performed, the studio didn't seem too eager to invest in another installment, let alone a major crossover. Still, it's fun to imagine what that story could have looked like. Maybe humanity's experiments with Jaggers opened another rift that brought new monsters into the MonsterVerse. Maybe the kaiju evolved and became a threat even Godzilla couldn't handle alone, forcing him to work with humans for once. There's endless potential there, and fans have been speculating about it since the first Pacific Rim came out in 2013. It's worth remembering that the MonsterVerse began just a year later with 2014's Godzilla, so the timing could have worked out perfectly. If Uprising had done better critically and financially, we might have actually seen a shared universe by now. Guillermo del Toro himself even admitted he was intrigued by the idea of a crossover, though he never took it beyond a fan's curiosity. It's one of those what-could-have-been moments in sci-fi cinema. So, while the dream of Pacific Rim 3 lives on, the reality is that it's probably not happening, at least not in movie form. The franchise's future now lies in its comics, its animated series, and maybe the occasional fan-made project that keeps the spirit alive. Fans can take some comfort in knowing that Pacific Rim still matters, even if it's not commanding theaters anymore. It's kind of poetic, actually. The world of Pacific Rim has always been about resilience, about humanity standing tall against impossible odds. And even though the franchise has shifted from the silver screen to other mediums, it's still fighting to stay alive, powered by the dedication of fans and creators who refuse to let the Jaggers go dark. So while we may never see Gypsy Danger face off against Godzilla on the big screen, that doesn't mean the dream is dead. It just means the story is evolving in its own way, carrying the same spirit that made us fall in love with the first movie in the first place. And who knows, maybe someday, when the timing's right and the audience demand is there, the gates will open again, and the Jaggers will rise once more. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.